Hello, everybody. I would like to present to your attention an excellent article from Phillips O'Brien about two mafia states, United States of America and Russia, aligning themselves on the question of Ukraine. So let's just start. We have witnessed a week that was both expected and yet extraordinary at the same time. The US government under President Donald Trump dropped all pretense that it was a friend of Ukraine or wanted a democratic state to survive or even would stand in common cause with its long-standing European allies, etc., etc. Instead, what became apparent as the week went on was that Trump was laying out a full-service system of cooperation with Putin and that the screws were being put on Ukraine and Europe. It was two mafia states aligning, a phrasing that I started to use this week. And okay, I just let you see what I'm seeing, what I'm reading as well. Okay, then there are two tweets about Trump and Elon Musk alleged threat to cut the access to Starlink. Then he denied, but I mean, do you even do you trust Elon Musk? Well-known liar who is lying every time he opens his mouth. That the guy who is promising who is promising for 10 years self-driving cars next year, or Tesla Roadster that quite a lot of people already paid in full prepayment. He said that in 2017, he said that it is being built right now, was being built in 2017, and it is yet not delivered, any of them. So he is a habitual liar who is now running your American government. So, I mean every word of this. The USA is now run by gangsters who both want to ally with other gangsters and are using threats of destruction and violence to get their way. Both gangsters, he means Trump and Musk. They certainly don't respect any law other than the boss is right and power is all that matters. Musk came out and said on Twitter, all power comes from the president who is empowered by the folk. I mean people. Okay, and then the tweet from Elon Musk. The executive branch must necessarily be subject to the will of the president given that he is elected representative of the people. Otherwise, we don't live on democracy, but rather bureaucracy. I mean, president is not elected by the people. He elected by the electoral college. There is no direct elections of president in the United States. But what do you expect from Elon Musk, who is not American? He is an immigrant who is now running and wreaking havoc in the machinery of your state. And you see that he doesn't understand anything about how America is supposed to be run. Representatives are Congress. They are called representatives because they are directly elected by people to represent them. So, president is not a representative of people. Because if it was the case, then the simple majority would be if you have simple majority, then you will be a president. But we had this case exactly that during 2016 elections when Hillary Clinton received more votes overall, but because of the electoral college, Trump was the winner of that election. So in American system, you can represent more people more people will vote for you, but because of the electoral college system, you will lose this election. Okay. By the way, one of the reasons I always thought Trump was out to screw Ukraine is because I paid attention to what Don Jr. and Musk in particular were saying. I was not paying, me personally, now I'm speaking about myself, I was not paying much attention what Musk was saying because I was not aware that he was going to be the, actually your acting president, because Trump is the guy who is running his mouth, and Musk is the guy who is doing all the dirty work, probably. But I was looking at what Don Jr. was saying, and Don Jr. was just Russian talking points, Russian propaganda, Russian lies relentlessly. And it was quite disgusting because he was mocking our people, our country, the country who is now fighting for its survival and its life. And it was so disrespectful, so insulting. And so this in such a bad faith. Not, it was obvious that he is our enemy, but I couldn't say how much sway Don Jr. is holding over his opinion of his father, because Donald Trump during election was still, his opinion was toned down, not so openly speaking or regurgitating Russian talking points as his son, Don Jr. Okay? And for me, the moment when I saw that Trump is not on our side and he's completely soulless, I don't find another word, when he said that Ukraine ridiculously lost 400,000 lives. Ridiculously. So the country who was attacked, who defended itself, and these people, again, when Trump says figure, he's taking it out of where, out of his ass, probably, or some other places, I don't know, but it is not from reality. We don't know exactly how many were killed, but we have quite a lot of civilians killed, and all of these were either the victims of unprovoked Russian aggression or soldiers who were fighting for their land, for their motherland, and heroically sacrificed their lives so that, for example, I can speak to you over this platform, and Europe can live in peace. Not only the rest of Ukraine, but the rest of the Europe, and probably United States as well. And so it was such an insult and disrespect for their ultimate sacrifice that I understood that this cannot be good person. Donald Trump. If there were any doubt, after this phrase ridiculously lost 400,000 people, you just, all doubts should be, you should abandon all doubts. You are dealing with despicable human being who is, he is saying right now quite a lot about the lives that this war, the loss of lives that and the killing should stop and so on, as if he cares just even a little bit about any lives that are lost. If he cared about that, then why he stopped support and military aid to Ukraine, ammunition that help us to fight Russians, if he for 6 months He's saying that we are retreating in Donetsk region. Yes, because you and your minions in Congress, this guy who is now a speaker again of the Congress, Johnson, because of your minions and you, for your personal gain, to prolong this war, not to give Biden opportunity to give us more weapons in time, so that it drags on to your election, so that you will have convenient talking point about war in Ukraine, that it is too long and you will finish it in 24 hours. Lying asshole. Lying asshole. We know that he doesn't have any plan. He doesn't have anything. And when he's now, and I saw some what he was saying on CPAC and what was Musk saying on CPAC. It is a cult. It is a cult. They are cheering to some bullshit, to the person who is bullshitting them in their face. And they are cheering as madmen, as if he is saying something so profound that they cannot just help themselves and should scream in, jubilation about about some pretty, mediocre things. And if you would like to ask how it happened that such a grotesque figure as Adolf Hitler was able to lead Germans, look at him. He looks comical. He, all these gestures, all these mannerisms, all these, when he's saying so forcefully, you see at Hitler and you want to laugh because, it's just grotesque. But look at Donald Trump. He is such a grotesque figure. But Americans like what they hear from him. They found their own Hitler. They found their Führer who will lead them as, as lemmings to the cliff. Okay, I digress. Sorry for that. By the way, the reason I always thought Trump was out to screw Ukraine is because I paid attention to what Don Jr. and Musk in particular were saying. Read both of their Twitter feeds if you dare, and you will get a constant diet of anti-Ukraine lies and pro-Putin love bombs. The emergence of the mafia state has huge implications for all the parties involved in the war for the freedom of Ukraine. As such, this week, the update will go through the development that influences all of them. So here we have it, the dawn of the new world with profound implications for international relations. The Trump and Putin families have a sit down, and then the picture of these talks in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, and at the head of the table, I forgot who was there, and on this side Russians, and on that side not Russians, Americans. The week had a number of examples of two mafia families in the world, the Putins and the Trumps, coming together. These examples were both open and more subtle. In the first case, there was a meeting of some of the underbosses in their families, held interestingly in Riyadh, a bastion of democratic freedom. Yeah. Saudis are very, keen on democracy, obviously. The expertise around the table was itself notable. Trump sent two people he has broken in spirit and was using as cover to traditional Republicans. That would be Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Both of these people, who had unfortunately given backers of Ukraine some hope, as they had both been supporters of Ukraine after the initial full-scale invasion. However, both are now broken figures who desperately mouth Trump's statements to try and get crumbs of recognition from the mafia boss. Think of them as Rick working for Ramsey Bolton. This is Game of Thrones reference. The third representative was more interesting. Trump's fellow real estate baron from New York City, Steve Witkoff, who is a special Trump emissary and was probably the most important. The US delegation's reaction to the meeting show how productive they were from the mafia family point of view. Rubio and Waltz gave a press conference. Witkoff was not quoted there, which was pretty gushing. The Trump family is on its way to settling all differences with the Putin family. Indeed, they agreed 4 steps that were all high on the Putin agenda. Here's how Rubio started the press conference. Secretary Rubio. Well, I would start by saying we've agreed on 4 principles that I think are important. First is that we are going to point our teams respectively to work very quickly to reestablish the functionality of our respective missions in Washington and in Moscow. For us to be able to continue to move down this road, we need to have diplomatic facilities that are operating and functioning normally. Second point is that we are going to appoint a high-level team from our end to help negotiate and work through the end of this conflict in Ukraine in a way that's enduring and acceptable to all the parties engaged. The third point is to begin to work at a high level as well, to begin to discuss and think about and examine both the geopolitical and economic cooperation that could result from the end to the conflict in Ukraine. Obviously, we have to see that conflicts come to successful and enduring end in order for that to be possible. And the last thing we agreed to is that while our teams are going to be working on all of this, the 4 of us who were here today, the 5 of us that were here today, so he forgot about Witkoff, are going to remain engaged in this process to make sure that it's moving along in a productive way. So now the author's lines. Let me quickly outline why. The first point is an intelligence priority for Russia. It can get its spies and their infrastructure back into full operation in the USA. The Russians have lost a lot of their intelligence capacity with the reduction of their personnel in the US capital. That is now over. It's back to cooperation. The second and fourth point show how the US wants to settle this war without Ukrainian input. The US and Russia will basically establish a permanent high-level bilateral group to try come up with a common position, which they will almost certainly try to foist on Ukraine. Ukraine can't be trusted as this mafia family talks as it's actually a democratic state. So, I mean, these are 2 authoritarian states trying to enforce their will on a democratic state, Ukraine. Third point is ominous. Trump hates sanctions and wants to get back to business with Russia as soon as possible. Indeed, Rubio. And third point is that begin to work at a high level and discuss and think about and examine both the geopolitical and economic cooperation, geopolitical and economic cooperation of United States with Russia after the end of conflict in Ukraine. And wants to get back to business with Russia as soon as possible. Indeed, Rubio gave the most tortured answer later in the press conference on this question. A few days before Trump's inauguration, I said sanctions would be the key test of where we are heading. It seems that the discussion is to try and find a way to lessen them with Russia. To give an even better idea of how sanctions are probably going to be downgraded sooner rather than later, Witkoff, who is probably the most truly influential of the Riyadh trio, gushed publicly at an investment forum just over a day ago about how he was developing a friendship with Putin and how Trump was pushing for a deal. Here was a verbatim quote. First, I had the support of President Trump, which is a really big deal. Secondly, we have a really good relationship with the Saudis. They assured us that this was real, and so to me, it became worth the trip. And so we went, and it was a great trip. I spent a lot of time with President Putin. So the US is openly and quickly moving to ally itself with Putin. This was emphasized by how the US has reframed the Russian invasion of Ukraine itself. The US is now pushing for a UN resolution that marks the anniversary of the full-scale invasion without any specific mention that Russia started the war, that Ukraine's territory has been invaded, or that Ukraine is the victim under international law. Here is one report on the US proposal. The draft US resolution is brief. It mourns the strategic loss of life throughout the Russia-Ukraine conflict and reiterates the principal purpose of the United Nations, so expressed in the United Nations Charter, is to maintain international peace and security and to peacefully settle disputes. The draft resolution implores a swift end to the conflict and further urges a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. So, both publicly and privately, the Trump family and the Putin family are now cooperating with Russia and planning for an even closer relationship. By the way, you do not have to take my word for all of this. Putin himself hailed the development of the past week as a great success with a sense of satisfaction he could barely suppress. And here's a clip of Putin, but I'm not going to play it here. Ukraine is made offers it can't refuse. Mafia families love to boss around and threaten those they think are weak and exploit them for whatever gain they can. This is certainly what the Trump family started doing to Ukraine this week, although they might not understand what they are facing in Ukraine. The famous line that I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse is one of the most quotable moments of the greatest gangster film of all time, The Godfather. And then the clip from Godfather. It was the one that ended up with the Hollywood producer Jack Waltz waking up to a severed horse's head in his bed. This is exactly the tactic that the USA is taking now towards Ukraine. They are threatening Zelensky personally and trying to force a crippling economic deal on Ukraine at the same time. The threats on Ukraine, Zelensky, are not even being repressed. Zelensky is being told by White House sources being quoted in the press that it's no longer safe for him to stay in Ukraine, and he should flee the country if he knows what's good for him. A second source close to Trump concurred with the assessment and suggested that the best case for Zelensky and the world is that he leaves to France immediately. Trump is also projecting as always, calling Zelensky a dictator and saying Zelensky approving is only 4%. Where the hell he did that figure? It's actually over 50%. He really can't keep his personal hatred of Zelensky under control. At one point, it boiled over in public and Trump made a direct threat. He said that if Zelensky did not agree a mineral deal with the USA, things are not gonna make him happy. The sad thing is that while Trump is a gangster, he is far less articulate than the ones in the movies. Indeed, the mineral deal is probably the best indication of mafia tactics that we can see. The USA is trying to dictate a deal to Ukraine that calls for the Ukrainians to hand over all their money to the USA and get nothing in return. We have an idea of what the US is asking for from Timofey Milovanov, the president of Kyiv School of Economics and former economics minister, who is plugged deeply into the Ukrainian government. Here is how he has outlined the US proposal. Ukraine pays 50% of its oil, gas, and mineral revenues to US fund until the fund reaches $500 billion. The US 100% owns the fund. For every new dollar of the US aid to Ukraine, it pays to the fund $2. This is immediate return of 100% of any US aid to Ukraine. So basically, the US gets 50% of Ukrainian raw mineral wealth for the foreseeable future, and that is simply payback for the past US aid, which was not given with the expectation of being paid back, and which had paid enormous strategic dividends to the USA. Moreover, if the USA gives Ukraine any more aid, the USA get an immediate doubling of the money in return. Basically, the USA will force Ukraine to pay double of a very highly inflated price to begin with. Of course, the reality is that USA is not promising any new aid or security if it signs the deal. White House is briefing exactly this to the press. It's basically a drastic overpayment for the aid that was promised to help Ukraine live. Of course, mafia states don't care about honor, dignity, freedom, or even living up to past bargains. They believe in screwing the weak out of all they can get. And as Trump has said of Ukraine, that he believes that they don't hold any cards that they can effectively play. And then the clip, Trump says Ukraine has no cards to play to end war with Russia. He even admits openly he is having great talks with Putin and not with Ukraine. The one problem the USA might face is that in Ukraine it is facing a people desperate and determined. The Ukrainians are not weak. They might indeed reject this deal regardless. And ultimately, that could be the mafia boss' dream for the Trump family. They make Ukraine an offer that they know Ukraine cannot accept. And if Ukraine turns it down, the Trump family can walk away and more openly align with the Putin family. Do not underestimate the chances of that. Today will determine whether Europe can adjust to the mafia state. I will write much more about this in coming weeks, but we simply don't know at this point whether European states are still thinking that they can cut a deal with the Trump family, or whether they are capable of thinking and acting on their own. As this update is being written, we might have the most important future indication of where this is heading. Today is the day of the German elections, probably arguably the most fateful in Europe history since 1945. And I say that without hyperbole. If, for instance, the AfD, which has been openly and consistently supported by Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, stages a surprise and does much better than expected, it might be time to stick a fork in Europe. The AfD is pro-Putin and anti-Ukraine and would be happy to go along with whatever Trump wants. But I mean, I don't know, because right now I think the result should be known more or less already. I don't think that AfD can, even if they greatly overperform, they cannot have a government themselves. They simply will not have enough seats. So any other parties can make a coalition that will form the government. Even if AfD will come on top of these elections, which is unlikely. However, if the CDU-CSU wins and can put together a coalition with the Greens as a major partner, it will be the best possible outcome for Europe and Ukraine. The CDU leader, Friedrich Merz, is in the last few hours started speaking as if he understood that the USA is now out of the game for free and democratic states in Europe. In a statement that would have been inconceivable days ago, he said, Germany might need to seek cover under the French and British nuclear umbrellas. To say that just before a general election, to acknowledge that Germany cannot trust the mafia state of the USA was no accident. It must be viewed now as something that the German people can understand and moreover can support. So, watch the German elections closely. They will tell us a great deal about the future direction of Europe. Will Europeans be happy to remain playthings of the mafia states, or will they perhaps be willing to stand up for everything that they have said they believed in? Have a good rest of the weekend, everyone. So, and have a good rest of the of the weekend, or of the Sunday, and Thank you for watching this, and till next time. Slava Ukraini!